color. In 2020, Amy was named on Worth Magazine's Groundbreakers 2020 list of 50 women changing the world list. She was also a recipient of Women in Agribusiness Demeter Award of Excellence. And prior to starting From Farms to Incubators, Amy spent over 2 decades as an investigative reporter at media outlets, including the USA Today Network, where she reported on agriculture and ag tech for the Salinas Californian. In 2021, she was named by Food Tank as one of 27 inspiring women reshaping the food system. All right, so with that introduction, it is our pleasure to pass things over to Amy Wu.
Well, Paul, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm really honored to be here today, and thank you to the Salinas Valley Chamber of Commerce for having me as your speaker, your guest this afternoon. Yeah, I mostly wanted today to be not a serious presentation, but more like interactive and more questions. But I will give some background about the project and about the initiative and where it's headed now as well. I might end up working my way backwards with that also instead of giving the full history. But briefly, my background is I am a journalist. I've been a professional journalist for, I'm not going to say how old I am, but I've been a professional journalist for more than 25 years. And I went to school to tell stories, to report. And Paul mentioned that the way that I came upon the story of women in innovators in ag tech was when I got a phone call in 2015 from then the executive editor, Pete Waversky, who was the editor of the Salinas Californian and also the Visalia Delta Times, who said to me, do you want to come to Salinas and be our local government reporter? And I had never been to Salinas Valley before, but I knew of it because I'm a big fan of reading some of John Steinbeck's novels. So I knew it was Steinbeck country. But I will say that it was definitely not my first time in California. I consider myself bi-coastal. Most of my relatives and family are actually in California. A lot of them spread throughout the Sacramento area and also in San Francisco. But Salinas Valley was definitely foreign to me. So when I arrived in early 2016, I think it was like January of 2016, what struck me was like, wow, it was like everywhere that I drove was agriculture and farming. I will say that I'm a voracious eater and consumer. I love shopping and going to the supermarket. And when I was growing up in the suburbs of New York, just about 35 minutes north of Manhattan, I had no encounters with farming and agriculture. I really thought that the food was like grown out of the aisles or something. So when I came to Salinas Valley, I was like, this is tremendous. Every corner I turned was another thousands upon thousands of acres. And later I learned that agriculture is a $9 billion industry, and about 80+% of the leafy greens that we eat come from the Salinas Valley, are produced here. So I started to report on it in the form of local government and also the industry itself. And I began observing, whether it be a discussion on ag tech or whether it be a discussion about overall contribution of agriculture to the economy, I just didn't see a lot of women. I didn't see a lot of women at the decision-making level. I didn't see a lot of women who looked like myself. And what was interesting in 2016 was that in the city council meetings that I covered and I sat in, a lot of the talk was about, let's grow ag tech as a sector. And I was sitting there in the audience, like thinking to myself, I have no idea what ag tech is. It was a foreign word. It sounded like something from outer space to me. And I was like, ag tech. So the more that I learned about it, and rather quickly, I was like, oh, agriculture and technology. And why is that important? Because the innovations that are being created are there to help the growers face some of the biggest problems that growers face. And at the same time, the Western Growers Center for Innovation and Technology, I don't know how many of you have heard of the center. If I was in a room, like I'd ask people to raise their hands, but I'm in this virtual space. Okay, so like I see three hands and people smiling. Okay, so a few of you have heard of the Western Growers Center for Innovation and Technology, which was new at the time because there was these startup companies that were using it as a business space and all in the ag tech space. So what happened was there was a call out for stories of minority women entrepreneurs in business by the International Center for Journalists. And here's the interesting thing is, I said to myself, like, I want to write about women in ag tech, but I don't even know if they exist. So I wrote a proposal to get a grant from the International Center for Journalists to tell stories. And they said, well, please, yes, we give you the grant. You're one of like 6 grantees. Find a way to tell a good story about them. And I was so happy. And then I said, oh, now I have to go look for them. So it was the first time in my life where I wrote a grant where I was intuitively, I was like, there's got to be some woman out there in the space, but I didn't know. So in early 2017, I went to a lot of the ag tech conferences. And I, Silicon Valley is only 50 miles about north of Salinas Valley. And in early 2017, a videographer and I started on our hunt for women innovators in the space. And we went to several conferences and we would look around and say, who's a woman here and who's a woman of color? And I would just walk up to them and I would just be like, hi, I'm Amy Wu. Like, I'm here and I want to know, are you a woman innovator in this space? And some of them would be like, wow, who is this person like appearing in front of me? So I got some people who were like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know what to say. And they were like, no, wait a second. No, I'm just here as a friend or as a wife and a girlfriend. But a few of them eventually said, yes, I'm working in this space. One of them was Trace Genomics, Diane Wu and Purnima Parameswaran. And then I connected with Dennis Donahue, who was a former mayor, actually, of Salinas, who became the executive director of Western Growers. And he said, let me see if I can help you a little bit. So I got a little help. And I ended up collecting 3 or 4 stories of women in this space who shared their stories. And then I put out a documentary in 2017, and it showed at the Western Growers Center for Innovation and Technology. I want to stay there for just a second, because when we showed the film for the first time in February of 2017 in that space in downtown Salinas, I invited county supervisors, city council people, growers, the heads of major trade organizations in growing, in agriculture, I should say, and also educators at community colleges in the area. We had a packed audience of probably 70 people fill up that space that night, along with a lot of good snacks and food and beverages and all that. But we showed the film and I invited all of the women in that film. There were 4 of them and more. There were a panel of 7 women, and they were all sitting there along with myself moderating, and everybody watched the film and they were like looking at the women, and the women were looking at each other like, wow, we never knew that there was this growing sector in ag tech, and we never knew women were creating technology for growers. And the women would look at each other like, I didn't know her company existed. Can you connect me? So I had actually planned on ending the project after the film, because it was a grant. And I was like, as a reporter, we are notorious for just going from story to story and being like, okay, next story. And now it's even like the world of Twitter and Instagram, it's even shorter. But I became really passionate about telling stories of women in the space, because I felt like their stories were not told. I wanted to inspire younger women and youth to read these stories and to look at these women and be like, wow, maybe I can consider career opportunities too in this space called ag tech. What I had learned in spending my time and living in Salinas was that there are a lot of young people in the region, a lot. At the time it seemed like everybody I was meeting was in their 20s or in their teens. And their stories were somewhat similar. They would all tell me, my parents worked in the fields and my grandparents, were also in agriculture, but I grew up being told I really need to leave the region. I really need to, success means let me graduate, leave the region, get a college degree outside of anywhere but the Salinas Valley area, and don't move back. But what I also heard from some of the young people there was that they really wanted to stay in the region. That a lot of their friends were here, their families are here. Culturally, they really wanted to be connected and have and stay here. But how could they earn a good living and also like eventually have their own house, their own family, and make a living and also stay here and be connected? So I started to connect the dots and say, wow, like, agriculture has new needs now, and it needs a new knowledge-based workforce. At the same time, the local government sees this as a critical part of the local economy. At the same time, there's this new opportunity for now women in these two industries that are traditionally male dominated. So I started to piece it together, and I thought, where could I continue to kind of contribute to this with storytelling? So I said, the more stories that I tell of women in this space, the more that this is going to snowball into maybe encouraging educators and young people into considering that this is a real opportunity. And agriculture is traditionally not known as being sexy. But I was like, vegetables and produce can be sexy, and it's not just being in the fields. I mean, so fast forward, and I love now, I mean, I didn't come from a farming family, but I am now really in love with being out in the fields. My day job is I work on a farm in communications on a 1,500 acre organic farm. I love sitting in the tractors, and I mean, I myself love that. I love being in the fields, but that's great. There's not enough women in farm mechanics either, farm machinery. But also beyond that, there are opportunities in research and marketing, in running these innovations. So that is why farm stay incubators exist. That's why today there's a film, there's a book, and that's why I spent 3 years on the book collecting the stories. It wasn't just me collecting the stories. I want to talk briefly about how the book is a community of people who contributed to this book. Actually, in 2018, I said to myself, there are so many inspiring stories of women. A lot of them had connections in the Salinas Valley. I would say 85% of the women in this book actually have some sort of connection with the Salinas Valley. Either their innovation is being used there or they're actually living in the region. Most of them are in California, Central Valley as well, actually. But I thought to myself, how best to tell their stories? I wanted to collect their photographs. So I went about and I said, this is not just going to be written words, like thousands and thousands of pages or a textbook. The word textbook really scared me when somebody said, why don't you write a textbook? And I got really scared. I said, I don't want it to be a textbook. I want this book to be where it's accessible. It's like what people who are not in agriculture can pick this up and understand the stories, can be engaged with the women, can understand the innovation. So I started to reach out to all these different women and interview them. I started to ask them, can you give me a collection of photographs about yourself, about your childhood, growing up, yourself in the farm with your innovation. I took a trip out in November of 2018 and followed them to their different places and took pictures. I ended up recruiting some amazing photographers who volunteered their time and their passion on this project. Some of them are based in the Salinas Valley. One of them is on this talk today, and everything. So thank you, Dexter, for doing all the work that you've done. I started to feel like I wanted to also engage artists because I felt like what better way to tell the story but art pieces. So some of the art in the book is by local artists like J.C. Gonzalez. We have a couple of other young people who created designs. I recruited some college students from Watsonville who also helped create designs for the social media for this. So I saw this as a real opportunity to really bring people together to create this book together. So there's like 20 contributors in the back of this book, along with all of the women who told their stories. So that's a little bit of what's happened all the way up to May, is we have the film, we have the book. Now, some people might say, well, why am I like so passionate about this topic? I've been asked that sometimes because, like I told you, I don't come from a farming family. I don't come from even a tech family, actually. I should tell you that my major in college was history, but that's an important piece of information because I feel like by telling the stories of today and documenting what's happening. Like 50 years later, I would like somebody to pick up this book at the Salinas Valley, like the library, and be like, wow, I can't believe that this was a book. Like this is something unusual. Like I see women everywhere now. Like this was actually special, like 50 years ago. So I kind of was looking into the future, like I want to document this part of our chapter in history, this intersection of something that's growing. And why am I documenting it? It's because I mentioned this earlier. I really feel like there's a big opportunity for younger people in their teens, K to 12, in their 20s to consider job opportunities in this space, for communities who are looking to build their local economies, to see that there's this connection between the local economy, policy, education, the community. Everybody eats. Like I've traveled throughout the country now, and everybody I know eats. Some people love to eat. Some people eat as a hobby. I mean, I love to eat, and eating has become, like, during the pandemic, it's everybody now. I feel like so many people now who didn't consider, I see people pointing to themselves. Yes, I'm one of them that likes to eat as well. So, during the pandemic, even people who never gave farming or food any thought, I think it's all hit us in some way that it's critical. Where does our food come from? Who's growing our food? Where is it going? And how does it get to our supermarkets? I see the local farmers markets growing tremendously during the pandemic, just tremendous. Like the CSAs went out like just like that, you know, in 2020. I see people baking like their own, a lot of people are now baking their own bread, like people who never considered like their backyard a garden are doing that. And I am doing that too. And I don't think it's just a trend. I think it's like really like folks are really thoughtfully thinking about this now. So this is not just going to be a trend, ag tech, or that it's going to just be a part of, I feel like, of agriculture going forward. So I've now talked for about 20 minutes, which is longer than I usually talk, actually. But I did want to share with you the bit of the genesis of the project, a little bit about who I am. Because, you know, I think that that's an important part of what's driven the project. Will I continue with this? Absolutely. In fact, I'm looking for other, at this point, From Farms to Incubators has now, I think, turned into a bit of not just journalism, but a mission to really connect women in this space. And anybody who's interested, I've heard from so many different kind of people, from people who are like, I want a third career. I'm interested in ag tech. Tell me how I can get involved. And these are people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. That's great. That's awesome, because there are opportunities all the way to younger people in their, you know, from 7th grade, 12th grade, who are like, I'm just interested in learning more about this. I want to hear more about women in this space and how do they build their own company. To startups in the ag tech space who, it doesn't matter what gender, men who are saying that I want to just support women in this space. Like I have a daughter, I have a granddaughter. I want to make sure like they understand that there is this opportunity. So that is where it is right now. And I would love to show a little bit of the clip of the documentary, because I don't feel like it's dated. I feel at all. I actually think like it very much, it's like it was made 5 years ago, like I told you, and I went back in 2018 and I updated it, but I think it's still very relevant to today. So I'd like to share this 4-minute trailer. If
there are any issues with sound, someone just let me know in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and share it.
I always wanted to have a farm because food is very cultural for me. My family's from the Philippines. I'm a first-generation American. That was the way I knew how to express my love.
I came here from Vietnam as a refugee, and witnessing the cost of malnutrition, I decided I would look for a solution.
My parents are immigrants, and they were field workers when they came to the U.S.
My father was a farmer where he had his own farm that he fed.
Okay, sorry. I don't know why it's doing that. Just give me 1 second and I'll get it reloaded.
always wanted to have a farm because food is very cultural for me. My family's from the Philippines. I'm a first-generation American. That was the way I knew how to express my love.
I came here from Vietnam as a refugee, and witnessing the cost of malnutrition, I decided I would look for a solution.
My parents are immigrants and they were field workers when they came to the US.
My grandfather was a farmer where he had his own farm that he fed his family with.
When you have a diverse group of people, decision-making is more robust and you get better outcomes, better creativity, because you have different perspectives.
I think maybe you just get used to being a minority and you stop thinking about it after a while. Everyone's an outsider in their own way, I think. Once you're able to focus on the successes and the message that you want to get out there, then the conversation becomes a lot easier.
In America, less than 1% of the population actually farms anymore. So we have a very, honestly, precarious situation where we have an aging population of farmers and not very many people who are doing it.
And it's very, very important that we make this sustainable. So we are putting technology to work to solve that problem.
The story started more than 5 years ago when Diane and I met. Both of us were very passionate about the way in which we can arm community members with a way to stay one step ahead of disease.
We've built a really simple soil test for growers and farmers to be able to look at the biology of their soil. The soil biology plays a huge role in yield and crop health, soil health and sustainability.
At least 3 times a week, we're out in the fields in Salinas. Getting in that feedback directly from our customer base, the growers, who are in desperate need of this technology. So we are making our technology fit the needs of the growers.
So our company, we do equipment tracking, timekeeping, and field scouting. It's a mobile app, so all the data collection is just through your smartphone.
Would you change anything right now as it is?
Yeah, but like the same structure is just like...
Trying to implement that software and telling them we can give them something that works that's better. They've also had other companies come in and say that, but a lot of times it's been companies from Silicon Valley. They come in from a different perspective, and so what makes us unique is knowing the ag side and knowing their processes.
Yeah.
We'll break it. But you guys will make it better.
Vitamin A deficiency disorders is just easy to solve, but it's still so prevalent. When I was little in Saigon, my mother, she would get the fruit and dye the rice with it. And the color of it is so strikingly red. I just have the hunch that the fruit was really rich. Red melon, the fruit to me that stand out. I came up with a way so that the farmers can then use whatever they have to make the oil and then keep that oil in their household.
It's important that the field be diversified and that women be at the table. Women don't get treated well unless there are enough, there's a critical mass.
My daughter is 10-year-old. She asks me, what is it that you're doing? And when I share that with her, she has this spark in her eye that, wow, I didn't know that's how you grew strawberries. Once the spark is there, they will find most innovative ways to solve things.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad that played really well, actually. So I'm happy to share, by the way, it's a 25-minute documentary. It's a documentary short, and I would love to share it with if anybody's interested in the full documentary. I would love to, hear from you, and I'd be happy to consider sharing that, especially if you're going to share it with other young people as well. I guess what next from Farms to Incubators, and then I would love to really take questions from folks or a conversation, but we're traveling through, the pandemic has kind of set things back a little bit. It was kind of the lost year, but things are starting to ease up a bit. And with the book publication, and also I forgot to mention, we had an exhibition at the National Steinbeck Center in November that actually it was a real exhibition inside the gallery, and we ended up doing an online presentation and an event. But we like to take the exhibit and also the book and the talk in person to several cities in California, the region specifically, Central Coast, and then the Central Valley area, and also into the Bay Area, especially, you know, where there's the intersection of technology, to highlight women innovators in the space, hoping to reach more young people and youth at K to 12 especially, and colleges and universities. And the reason why I keep saying K to 12 is because I feel like there's a real opportunity for those of you out there who are educators or interested in education. I just feel like there's a real opportunity to create this as part of the curriculum going forward, and especially when it comes to that age, that grade level, where it's so critical for like girls and young people to see that, oh, there's people working in this space and how did they get there. We have a searchable directory of women in ag tech that launched in March. That's a partnership with 4 other women, 4 other ag tech companies, including Marone Bio Innovations and Ag Launch, and happy to share that searchable directory with anyone. Again, I keep using the word share, happy to share out. It's because we would really like to just get this out that way. And it's definitely not proprietary. We want folks to join in. Continuing to collect and document the stories of women innovators in agri-food tech. I have a What Can I Do document. That's the name of the document, What Can I Do, actually. If you're interested, I would love to share that document with you as well. And the film was recently actually accepted at the Sacramento International Film Festival, and will also be thankfully screening in the area of Sacramento as well, and that region. So that is the end of my like formal sharing, but I'd love to get questions from whether that be Paul or anybody out there. I'm happy to answer anything as well.
I have a million questions, but I'm sure there are other people here who would also like to speak before I do. Isabella left a question in the chat, and it says, have you noticed more women from particular states or regions in ag tech? Do you think there's a reason for that? If so?
Have I noticed more women from particular states or regions in ag tech? I mostly focused my research in California, eventually Midwest, and also in New York. And I can say for certain that in California, I felt like a lot of the women were from the California or West Coast region. And I think it's because agriculture is so huge in California. I mean, the state itself is like much of the left side of the United States. So it's such a tremendous force, agriculture already. So I'm not surprised by that at all. But I think that it's really catching up everywhere across the U.S. I see that the universities are playing a critical role. I see that there's ag tech programs, conferences now from everywhere from Tennessee and the Mississippi area to New Mexico, to upstate New York, Pennsylvania, and also internationally. There's a lot of things happening in the agri-food tech space. It's kind of beginning to explode, I think, actually. And also, do you think there's a reason for it? I see more women definitely in the space, because I think that it's beginning to catch on. Agri-food tech as a sector is starting to really attracting investors. There's more conferences, there's more women speaking at the conferences, there's more networking, there's more media stories related to agri-food tech. Then there was the pandemic and there was people more interested in this area. And so I just think that there's more and more of this domino effect that's kind of leading to this big wave that's not yet come, I think. So that's a really good question. Yeah. Thanks, Isabella.
And then Haley asked the question, I'm curious about local ag tech training programs in the Monterey Bay region to help create a local talent pipeline. Are there any that you can share? Kind of adding on to this, like what would you suggest if there hasn't been one yet created, how we could accomplish that?
Yeah, I think that there are already existing some existing programs and exciting things happening in the Monterey County area. Certainly in Salinas, the universities while the colleges like Hartnell College, I think has done a tremendous job. I mean, with first of all the classes and the certificate programs and the education they're providing. Not just in agriculture, but now extending it into innovation. And every year, the Salinas Valley Agtech Summit has been hosted at Hartnell, and they've done a tremendous job. Went in person and I was like, this is amazing. I mean, there's showcases of how innovation works on the farm. There's a farm there where, there's demonstrations. There's also K-12 programs, including, Coder Dojo and also competitions that are being held also, I think. So those are just a couple of examples, but I was going to say that Cal State Monterey Bay also has some really good programs going on. Startup Monterey, I think they have monthly meetings that where for networking and folks interested in that space. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Local talent pipeline, but there's still more of a need, I think, probably to create that. Digital Nest, I forgot to mention Digital Nest. They're doing a tremendous job for young people, I think age 14 to 24 years old. They started in Watsonville. I want to give them a shout out. They started out in Watsonville. Jacob Martinez is the executive director, and they provide like after school programs, weekend programs, trips to big agribusiness companies and tech companies as well. And they train up young people to be tech savvy, have the skills, but also connect it with agriculture as well, and also give them internship opportunities. So a big shout out to Digital Nest that has a center, I think, in Salinas as well. So that's a great question.
Paul, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple things to what Amy's saying. So 1 point, Digital Nest is about to unveil, they're moving their location in Salinas to the old firehouse that's kind of in a more central location. And Shay is going to organize a visit for some of us, and we might end up doing something like that for other chamber members soon. And as far as agricultural ag tech training that Haley asked about, there's the Growers Shippers Association Foundation has the Ag Knowledge Program, which is usually like one Friday a month for about 10 Fridays. And it's not tech specific, but it's certainly about agriculture to get you out into the community. And I'm a graduate from that program from a few years ago. So, and then I have one other comment that I want to make to Amy, which is an offer for you as well. So the chamber, a couple years ago, we were talking about what the chamber can do to support women in roles of leadership. And we convened, about 30 women showed up, and I was very good by being quiet during the whole meeting and telling them I was just going to listen. And we talked about some of the challenges that women face, and what the chamber could do. And one of those things was just about visibility and representation. You know, when you don't see people who look like you doing certain things, then you don't know it's out there. So Amy, an offer to you is we could take either a profile of one of the local women ag leaders and turn that into an article in the Business Journal, and also talk about your book as part of that, just as another way to kind of highlight your work and highlight some of the local women in ag. So I'd be happy to work with you on that. So thank you.
That would be fantastic. I think that would be excellent. There, like I mentioned, there are 30 plus profiles of women in this book and their photos. And I think that it'd be a great way to get their stories out further and amplify what they're doing, especially in the region. And really excited to hear about Digital Nest. That's great news, actually, that they're expanding that way. Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else had a question before I start jumping in with the ones I jotted down. Sorry. Okay, so I'll just go ahead then.
Judy has a question.
Sorry, Judy, you take over.
I'll sort of question and direction. I'm from Watsonville and I'm a painter, and I took Focus Agriculture, and I love Watsonville, and I love the industrial agriculture that's going on here. And there are two things that I want to speak to. or 3 things, or 4. No, well, I'll be so. But I would love to know if there's somebody in Watsonville that you want to do this proposal for, because I know a couple of women farmers, and I think that'd be great to bring Watsonville, we're right here. And then the other thing that I want to ask you about is what I saw with the pandemic is that the smaller farmers are much more nimble than the industrial agricultural farmers, that they can take off and do farm stands. So I wanted to speak to that. And then my ambition as a Watsonvillian is to take the depot that's owned by the Driscoll family right now and turn it into a farmer's market for all the local farm people here, and also to a train station. And so that's my goal. And then I'd love to see, sort of how I can participate in your thing. And I'm a woman, that's all. So, but if you could speak to these smaller farms and how how the pandemic has really brought them to the forefront with their nimbleness and how they can feed us better. That was my question.
Yeah, small farmers are essential. I mean, in terms of what they contribute, and especially it's been seen during the pandemic. And I can speak locally, where I live, the majority of the farms are all small farmers, actually, and the definition of small farmer being that the acreage, they don't have a lot of acreage. It's maybe like a couple of growers, maybe just themselves, with a half an acre or an acre. And a lot of them have been distributing through CSAs. So like I said, during the sharing, I think that they've been, during the pandemic, they were sustaining a lot of the need for a certain fresh produce and access to local access to fresh vegetables and fruits and so forth. A lot of them quickly ran out, though, even the subscriptions of CSAs, but a lot of them the small farmers I saw were also forced to quickly change their business model, I think, and to go digital and to sell, to find ways to sell online and to have an online presence. Whether it be that online store or a way that people could connect with them, an online presence. So the number of small farmers that I talked to, they were like, I'm just working on getting my website up there, and I'm working on taking photos of all my produce and getting them up there. So again, I think that we need to support as many small farmers as possible, because they are doing a tremendous job of feeding communities, and also they have a true passion for what they do, because so much labor goes into farming. It's very expensive. It's labor intensive. They're working 24/7, and they truly have a passion for the land. For the intersection of how it falls in with ecology, for making a difference, for going toward regenerative practices as well. I know a lot of the small farmers are adopting practices, different kinds of cover cropping, or different strategies in how they farm as well. And when I go back to the educational model, and also to the communities, we need to find ways to support them. And maybe it's through more grants, or we should I'll go to the farmers markets and keep buying their produce as well. So thanks for that. And for the term of Watsonville, the good news is that we have a talk in Watsonville at the Watsonville Public Library. And we have that coming up in September. One of the young women who is born and raised in Watsonville, Myra Ruiz, she worked on this project. She's from Watsonville. She also has, I think, worked with Digital Nest. She's going to be speaking with me together. And the reason why I think Watsonville is really critical is because they're, like I said, Digital Nest. I have a heart for Digital Nest, and I've seen what the positive things they do there. I think there's a lot of youth there as well who grew up in farming families, and there's a real opportunity to share these stories with them. So I'm super excited about that. I'd love to connect with you further. I mean, especially if you're an artist, we may try to have some of the art pieces, there to share as well. So I would love to hear from you. And I will leave my email address, my contact, I think, in the chat box as well. Thank you.
Okay, were there anyone else that had a question for Amy? Because I'm itching for mine. So I didn't really realize the scope of the ag tech industry, because in my mind it had to do mainly with the mechanical aspect and creating new machinery and innovative machinery and things like that. And the video really touched on all the different aspects of it, in terms of like the digital technology and the biotechnology, and like coming up with how to create the best soil to grow the produce and things like that. So when I first thought of ag tech, I thought about the mechanical advancements, and this might be nitpicky, but I was wondering if there's ever any pushback about, if they're creating these machines that are able to do the work of certain farm workers, is that going to be an issue in terms of jobs in the area? If you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I thought about that as I was doing a lot of the research too. Is innovation and quote unquote technology, that big umbrella, replacing our human labor, our labor force, basically, of people working in this area? And what I have concluded is absolutely not. It's complementary, because it's a new set of skills that are needed really to operate some of these technologies that I'll have to say that I don't have the background to operate some of this. I mean, I've been telling the stories about them and researching them, but it really takes another level of education, I think, to truly develop them or operate them and work within them. So I see it as an opportunity, definitely not as a replacement. We will need humans to operate. Like, I'll give an example with the robotics and automation. There are robots that pick vegetables and pick different kinds of crops, but we have yet to get to the point where there is a robot that can replace humans that could pick certain kinds of fruits. For example, berries that are really sensitive, or cauliflower that when you even touch them, your fingerprints will bruise them. So I think that there is going to be that need for the human knowledge and the day that maybe that's developed, you're still going to need somebody to operate that as well. And I also think that there is when I think of innovation, I also think of innovative ways to grow and to really promote regenerative agriculture as well. So it's experimenting with maybe the kinds of cover crops you have, or new strategies with no-till or minimum till. I think that you can expand the definition of ag tech. I mean, agriculture has always been dependent on technology. I mean, right now, the tractors with that I know from John Deere, they're just driving themselves. I mean, there's this amazing GPS system. You just sit there and you put in how much oil you have or how much gas, and it just kind of drives itself. But I think this level of innovation is going to definitely require brain power to come up with it and to operate it as well, and to decipher it. There's a lot of analytics and that goes into get to going through all that data.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was just the first thing that really came to mind when thinking about that. But it is nice to hear your perspective on it, because like I said, there's so many aspects to this that I hadn't really considered. And the biotechnology of it all is really fascinating, and how that could expand agriculture, not just in our region, but beyond, if we're able to make soil suitable for plants at all times of the year, or make it so that soil that wasn't previously suitable is now suitable. Very, very cool to see.
Yeah, I also think it's finding ways to encourage a new generation of farmers and growers as well. It's really challenging for young people, I think, in their 20s and 30s who want to get into farming, with the land access as well. Land is really expensive, and if you didn't grow up in a family where it's passed down from generation to generation, even then, if it is, it's just really expensive. The equipment, the infrastructure that goes into it, the knowledge now to keep up with farming. So I think there needs to be more support in general, I think, for not just innovation or ag tech, but also for agriculture, and really kind of supporting growers. Yeah.
I just want to point out a funny thing that I noticed. I'm happy to see a couple men on the call. Joseph Wu, whom I'm assuming is a relation, and then Dexter Farm and Paul Farmer. I just think it's kind of funny that we need to get more men to be involved in understanding women in the ag industry and supporting them. So we'll do our part.
That's a really good point, Paul. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, Joseph Wu is my dad, so he is related, unlike Diane Wu in the book. Dexter, yeah, I hadn't thought about Dexter's surname, but yeah, that's true. We need more men on. We need to get more men on the call.
Yeah, and I'll just say as well that a thank you to you, Amy, for the work that you're doing, because as the population in the world just continues to grow, the only way that we're really going to be able to do that is by applying technology to be able to grow more food with the space that we have. And I think it's important that women have a seat at that table, right? Because they're typically haven't been there, and
Yeah.
it takes the work of people like you to recognize and celebrate and uplift those people. So this chamber in particular wants to be supportive of things like that, but we also want to thank you for your efforts in what you're doing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And like I said, this is going to continue, and from farms to incubators has now moved on to another stage where I think we're looking for more folks who want to actually join in. So would love to hear from people. And in terms of the documentary, I think what the documentary and book prove is that storytelling and getting those stories out is so critical. When I would first talk to some of the women in the beginning, like some of them would say, my story is really boring. Like there's nothing to share, really, nothing much to talk about. And I think it took years to just, I would start out by asking them what their grandparents did, where they're from, when they were in high school, what did they study, what were some of their favorite courses, and it kind of opened up the original question I had as to like, why would somebody who doesn't have a background in farming, who be so passionate about launching an ag tech company? Because being an entrepreneur is challenging enough. You have to like get the capital, you have to fundraise, build your own team. There's a huge failure rate for entrepreneurs in general. So that was the core of it. I was like, why would somebody want to do this? And like some of them like moved from like New York to California, and we're just driving around talking to growers to launch this. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Were there any further questions for Amy?
I was going to say that there is a woman on this call as well who was who's in the book, Penelope Nagel. I hate to call people out, but I will. Penelope, I've been following her since maybe 2016 and 17. It's been a while now, but the reason why I wanted to call her out is because without the women sharing their stories, like I probably asked them thousands of questions and sent them thousands of emails and annoying questions, but each of them spent so much time in also sharing their stories. And without that, we wouldn't have a documentary, we wouldn't have a book. And Penelope is also a fellow open water swimmer or long distance open water swimmer. So I don't know, I wanted just to say that yeah, Penelope also, maybe you could talk a bit about this, but she's with Persistence Data Mining, and they also have done work in Salinas Valley, right? With Thrive and at the Western Growers.
Yeah, so we were part of the Thrive group. Gosh, I think that was back in 2018. We're members of Western Growers, and we have a soil nutrient mapping solution to help farmers guarantee more sustainable practices. And one of the things is, and I think it was mentioned, is making sure that our focus now in agriculture is a little more in technology. We can make better decisions with better technology, and that's so important. And as an ocean swimmer and 9th generation farmer, it is my passion. I can remember people saying, if you're just looking to make money, go sell real estate or become a salesperson. Being an entrepreneur is not an easy path to wealth. So if that's why you're doing it, it's not a good idea. But if you're doing it because you're truly passionate, I'm truly passionate about agriculture, and Amy and I kind of have this special relationship because of the connection to the water. And as a 9th generation farmer, that's what feeds my family, and swimming in the ocean kind of feeds my soul. And, making sure our soil is sustainable and healthy, provides both of those things to both the land, the water, the people, the animals, and it truly is my passion. So thanks for letting me participate, Amy.
Thank you.
Amy, are you okay if I put your email in the chat for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that I'm very happy to. I'd love to hear from you guys, from everybody on this call, and especially if you're interested in maybe the film, screening it, and learning a little bit more about what's next in getting the searchable directory. And even if not, I just like to hear from all of you out there who on why this interests you or what you'd like to learn more about. So absolutely include my email, and I will also send over the link to the film to those interested. Yeah.
Were there any last minute questions that anyone had?
Well, so I'll just make a comment. I put in the chat box to Judy. I don't know if you saw it, but I'm a Watsonville boy too. So good luck on realizing your vision with the depot and the farmers market. If you need any help from us, we're all connected here in this area. So, but certainly keep us apprised of what's going on. Again, on behalf of the chamber, I just want to thank Amy, and I'm happy that we've been able to continue our relationship even after I was sad when you left the area, but I'm happy that you're still connected to us. And so I'll follow up with you on my offer about putting something in the business journal. And again, on behalf of the chamber, thank you for the work that you do, and to everybody present today, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you everybody who joined, and I will definitely be following up with you. Thanks for the offer.
Right.
This meeting was recorded, so I'll send it out to everyone on the call, and it'll be later posted on our website. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.